Today, we're back in Galesburg, Illinois, a town home to 6 subdivisions, one of the busiest rail corridors in the nation, and one of Illinois' largest rail yards, coming in at over 4 miles long. We start the day off right with some CSX foreign power. I'm sure many of y'all have heard by now that CSX is starting up a heritage unit fleet that will rival Norfolk Southern's. For those of you that have seen CSX 1827, the new B&O heritage unit, and have wondered why the nose and cab is painted in CSX colors, it's to symbolize CSX pulling their rich history with them. It's a pretty neat concept that's certainly never been done before. On the eastern part of the Y, we see a short local freight that's caught in a traffic jam. With well over 100 trains a day passing through Galesburg, it's not uncommon for parts of the system to get clogged up sometimes. At the end of the grainer, we're greeted with yet another CSX engine. Foreign power on the head and rear end makes me wonder if this is a transfer train of some kind. With all the tracks now clear, the local freight was permitted to go. If you look at the locomotive's nose, you'll notice a strange black box mounted to it. This, oddly enough, is an AC unit. There's a few standard cab EMDs here at Galesburg that have a setup like this. Why did the railroad decide to put the AC system on the nose instead of the roof? I ain't sure, but I can guess. Maybe it makes for easier or safer access when servicing the air conditioner. $29.55 is what you call a trimmer unit. Its main job duties are handling miscellaneous tasks around the yard in order to keep things running smoothly. This includes bringing sand cars to the sand towers so they can be kept full, servicing nearby customers within yard territory, which it just got done doing, or bringing bad order cars to the rip track. Basically, $29.55 and its crew take care of the odd jobs in the yard that other crews don't have time for. Up next, we see a giant yard movement assisted by BN number 54, a very interesting engine. Number 54 was originally built as an SD9 for the CB&Q way back in 1955, but it was later converted to a TEB C6 by BN in the 80s. It's unique on BNSF, not just because of its history, but also because of its 2-digit road number, dynamic brake unit, and cab. Few slugs on BNSF's roster have a cab, and even fewer have dynamic braking capabilities, but number 54 has both. After the yard movement stopped, a couple trains passed on the adjacent main lines. Unfortunately, we don't get to see the power on the grainer, but I think the power on this mixed freight makes up for it. Then, the yard movement started to go, making for one heck of a shot. This is the first and only 3-way meet I've ever seen at Galesburg. And one by one, each train came to an end. As the yard movement backed up, a very interesting piece of rolling stock came by. It's a scale test car. These things are used to calibrate axle load limits and the scales that weigh loaded rail cars. Usually, scale test cars are pretty small, and this is the first one I've come across that's disguised as a boxcar. As the yard movement made its exit, so did the mixed freight from earlier. Galesburg is the final destination for this train. After it stops in the yard, its power will be uncoupled and the train will be broken down for sorting. Of course, this wouldn't be a trip to Galesburg without paying a visit to the Locomotive Shops. On the way there, we stop off at one of the bridges that spans the rail yard, where we see a local freight with quite an amazing lash-up. It's a GP60B, sandwiched between two B40-8Ws. It's like the 90s never ended. And on top of that, all these engines are ex-Santa Fe. GP60s and B40-8Ws are some of the last and most powerful four-axle road locomotives ever made for freight service. B40-8Ws, for instance, have 1,000 horsepower per axle, and GP60Bs ain't far behind, sporting 950 horsepower per axle. GP60Bs are also pretty darn rare. There was only 23 of them ever made, all for the Santa Fe, and their numbers have only declined over the years, but there's still a handful out there. Down on the ground, we see an old YN2 AC-44 and a BNSF-9 war bonnet. If you've ever had trouble telling the difference between AC-44s and -9s, just look at the grills behind the cab. You'll find that AC-44s have more of them, and they're in a different arrangement. While you can't see it from this angle, AC-44s also have a larger box behind the cab. That box holds the AC inverters for the traction motors. But on a Dash-9, that box holds the air conditioning system in a big electrical switchboard underneath. Next up, we see two Merger Macs, which are pretty much just the Burlington Northern version of a BNSF war bonnet. Interestingly, BNSF has dang near equal numbers of Merger Macs and Dash-9 fake bonnets, with about 120 of each. Of course, their numbers have declined over the years, but that's a pretty interesting and unexpected correlation. A bit closer to the Locomotive Shops, we see something completely unexpected. It's an ex-Norfolk Southern B32-8. Only 49 of these locomotives were ever produced, including their wide cab variants, so being able to see one is quite a treat. If you look at the cab, you'll notice there's GECX reporting marks, which could be 526's saving grace. Now that it's owned by GE, it at least has a chance of being rebuilt or refurbished. Coincidentally, coupled to that Dash-8 was another Dash-8. Unfortunately, 833 has no chance of being saved. It's already been sold to LTEX for scrap. Now, it's only a matter of time before this engine is shipped off to be dismantled, but at least we get to see it while it's still in one piece. A little further down the line, we see some sweet Santa Fe colors. I think it's so cool how you can see the same locomotive multiple times in random parts of the country. The last time I caught 777, it was leading the southbound mixed freight in Oklahoma. Also, it looks like 1755 is back in town. This was Galesburg's resident bluebonnet for a while there. Hopefully it's here to stay once again. closer to the entrance of the shops, we see another war bonnet, and by yet another sheer stroke of coincidence, 715 just so happens to be the other BNSF war bonnet I've caught leading a southbound train in Oklahoma. I swear these things are following me. And for the last catch of the day, we see 3 very old ex-Southern Pacific engines that have come down from the Silvis Locomotive Shops. Each one of these locomotives was originally made in the late 60s, and while they all have quite a rich history, I think 2691 takes the cake for the most interesting out of the bunch, because it was originally made for the famous Pennsylvania Railroad. Over the years, this single engine has served for Pennsylvania, Penn Central, Conrail, Chicago Northwestern, Southern Pacific, Union Pacific, and now NREX. Unfortunately, after over half a century on the rails, all these old engines will be scrapped. But just like 833, I'm glad we get to see them while they're still in one piece. Thanks for watching. If y'all enjoyed this video, consider checking out some other ones of mine. Also, maybe pass yourself by the merch shop. Anyways, till next time.